We now welcome in our guest this week. I guess you'd call him the head honcho on the event side for the programming and all the good stuff that goes out on the competition floor. From the World Fitness Project, it's Will Moorad. Will, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
So we're here to talk a little bit about the Tour Stop One workouts, and you can hear my son shouting in the background just a little bit. Don't worry.
He's so excited, that's why.
He's really pumped to get to Indianapolis and see those first couple of Tour Stop events. But I'll start just off the top. What would you say was maybe some of your guiding principles in putting together the entire collection of Tour Stop One events?
Yeah, a lot went into that, and I think it changed when we went to the venue and saw that there was turf available and things like that. We actually moved around a few events that incorporated sleds and things of that nature that were going to happen later in the season on rubber floor, actually. So little things like that helped guide what the final product was. But I think as far as the scope of all the events and the movements and the time domains and things like that, we wanted it to be a balanced weekend from an intensity standpoint. Different workouts demand different things of the athletes, whether it's a 24-minute time cap with the first event or the echo bike sled push, which is a sprint. So it was a pretty wide range of what we were gonna put the athletes through. And then also a consideration was just proximity to other events and controlling volume and things like that. So it wasn't too much on the athletes because it is, the first tour event of the season.
What went into the testing? We know that you're obviously very, very fit. Even last year at the Masters Games, still a champ and fit. How many of these did you test? What was that collaboration like from writing it on paper, doing the testing to finalizing them?
Yeah, I did all of them, and I did every iteration of all of them. And Saxon hopped in on about half of them and then gave feedback and watched me do other ones and got splits and things like that are necessary to hit the time domains we were aiming for. So yeah, a lot went into it. It was good to We did them with the girl weights, we did them with the guy weights, we did them with the challenger weights in both divisions. uh so many aspects went into program design, and me and Saxon had a whole lot of fun messing with different aspects of each event, changing a rep here or there, or changing a load here or there. Um, we were pretty close to hitting the nail on the head on the first iteration of all of them.
Wow.
The one that we probably adjusted the most was the front squat, or the gymnastics complex front squat one. We had, and we can go through them all in order if you want, but yeah, that one had a few different iterations, with the gymnastics complex being a little bit different and the barbell weight and reps also changing throughout the testing process. So it was pretty thorough, almost like too much. Like, hey, man, you can't do these workouts every day. No one can do that, but
Little
yeah, we
overuse.
yeah. I was like, all right, probably shouldn't just test events every day.
Yeah.
So you bring up that you tested, the girls' weights, the guys' weights, the pro and the challenger. Just right off the bat, why make the challenger weights not the same as the pro division?
Yeah, so when we're building out a tour, just like many other sports, there's multiple events. There's majors, and then there's just other events on the pro tour that will allocate points towards the world ranking system. And we're not to the spot yet where we can have 10 events, four of them being majors, six of them being minors that also have points allocated towards the world ranking system and then the qualification for a world championship. So to do that within the same building was a challenge that we had to kind of figure out. So really the challenger events are very similar to the pros, but it's a different competition on the weekend. They're on the same point structure, right? The 500 points for the champion of the pro division, and then I'd have to get it pulled up, but it's 200 or something, I believe, for the champion of the challenger division. But the athletes are competing against only the challenger division. if they're in the challengers, and then the pros are competing against only the pros in the pro division on the weekend. So I think it wasn't necessarily like, oh, these athletes aren't capable. They're more than capable. A lot of these athletes are games veterans and rogue veterans and Wadapalooza, you name it. They're some of the best in the sport. But just for the nature of the tour, that's what we went with. And we wanted to have a little bit of change between the workouts. And from a logistics standpoint, we had a whole different set of workouts written, and it was like, that doesn't make sense from logistics of the weekend. Just strip the weights down a little bit, and it's easier for flow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and is that ultimately what you're working towards? Because we've talked about it a little bit in the past, but also you mentioned it here, like creating that separation, because ultimately there could be more events and a separation in like the tiers of that, very much like to golf is, where you can
Yeah.
all earn FedEx points, but certain events are signature events and earn more and have a slightly different field and a slightly different feel in the competition.
Absolutely, that's something we're working towards. I think and that's a big project, and we've had discussions with a lot of events that that are interested in being a part of that tier system, which would hopefully take away from some of the online stuff that's been happening. That's just not ideal for pro sport, or pro fitness in this sense. The further we can get away from that and some of the ambiguity that comes with that, the better, because people want to be in live competition. And really, just from the community standpoint of it, we all kind of want to be together in person. So, yeah, I think creating a system where the majors, the WFP events, are this allocated this amount of points and this amount of prize money, and then the Challenger Series is allocated a little bit lower, a little bit less prize money, but they're all working towards a bid to accumulate, enough points to qualify for the World Championships is definitely a goal, and it's in the works. So yeah, we're all just we're constrained to having to do it in Phoenix or in Indianapolis and Phoenix this year, but it's year one, and the team's happy with how it went out, or how it's rolling out. So I think, it wasn't a slight on anybody in the challenger division at all, because ultimately, the points allocated to the challenger division, they're all competing against each other. So I think some people probably would want to compare themselves against the pros and things like that. And, we just didn't do it that way for this season. But I think moving forward, having a bigger web of competitions that feed into the same tour or league is the goal.
All right. Well, Lauren, do you have something else? I'm going to pull up the workout so we can kind of go one by
Yeah, you
one.
can pull up the workouts, because I guess my first question with the workouts specifically, is there a one? I'm sure there is. Which one, rather, let me rephrase it. Which one are you most anticipating? What the turnout's going to be, whether it is a battle that you're anticipating between athletes, an upset, like what is that workout that you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to grab my slushy and my popcorn for this one?
Right. Yeah, yeah. See, I mean, good question. We wrote them in a way that we hoped that all of them would create great races, and that a lot of people have a fighting chance. I think transitions across majority of these workouts play a big factor, and urgency is going to be rewarded, because not all of them, but a lot of them are fast paced, no real reason to slow down. There's some tact in where where you break on the sandbag one, or on the front squat one. Yeah, this one, or other events where you have strategic breaks. But I think you can kind of go full gas on a lot of these, which, a no rep here or an error in transitions there could add up. So I think all of them I'm excited about. I'm obviously very biased. But you look at the first one, and it makes me, I mean, there's a lot of events that I have running in barbell or gymnastics element, but the first thing that comes to mind is the first event of semifinals last year.
Mhm.
And, at least the one that I partook in, and it was, Roman and Adler kind of led the way and were separated from the pack by, I think, around a minute on that. So you'd kind of want to think, okay, maybe those two guys are the favorites for this one. that was a year ago, so a lot of people have improved since then. But if I'm having to pick favorites, I'll go off of my past experience and those guys beating me. So, I think I got fourth in that and Saxon got third. So the only two guys that beat us in that were Roman and Adler. So I
Okay,
think that
okay.
would be a cool race. I know Pat did pretty well in that one in the West Coast. I think Colton did well.
Hmm.
Obviously Sprague and Hopper and Dallin are obviously always favorites. So I mean, obviously the whole roster is insane. I
Mhm.
think
Yeah.
it's hard to pick, but yeah, I mean, if we're looking at the first one, majority of the time spent on the run. So I think it's, do you go touch and go on those snatches or not is kind of the puzzle that these guys are trying to put
Would
together.
you?
I did it touch and go, and I banked a lot of time because of that, but my run suffered. So it just
Ah.
kind of depends on, and I was right around 17 minutes when I did it. Obviously, different run courses and things like that, but
Mhm.
I think you know, are people going to get sucked into a 5 minute mile pace on the first run? And then, you're 2K into the workout and you start to blow up.
Yeah.
I
That's a good
and,
question. That's the gambit, right?
right. And I think in something that's that fast, who knows, somebody's probably gonna go way faster than I did it, but 17 to 21 minutes, that's a long time to be on the gas.
Yeah.
And all these athletes are more than capable of holding that there. It's just what's gonna give.
Yeah,
So
it feels very like Helen Pro, like you did at the games,
right.
where you have to run hard, and everything else is just enough to make you think about it, but not really. Like like you're not going to come down on the ring muscle ups. The snatches, like if you don't go touch and go, it's you're following the bar down, you're kind of resetting your hands and you're pulling almost always with the goal that like that those last couple of runs are going to hurt.
Yeah, I think so. And you can I did it both ways, touch and go and singles. And if I were to give advice, I would tell the athletes to touch and go and then just see what happens on the last round and a half. Because that's
Of
when I
course.
really like started to hurt. But
Put
it
all
was
your
worth
chips
it.
on black and send it.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think just like the transitions there, if you lose a second or two per rep across, 2 seconds per rep, that adds
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
especially with this type of a field. So, and the running is so good now with these athletes, and that's kind of why we made it. We didn't make it squat snatches. We wanted people to like not worry about rolling their ankle in those big foam super shoes that everybody wears now, and just really be
Yeah.
able to gun it.
Yeah.
Um, so
And,
should be
and,
cool to
and
watch.
this is what you're going to set the tone with. This is going to be the very first test of the World Fitness Project Tour Stop. This is the first live event that's going to take place, and if you get if you get some people really selling their souls on this, then I think that's a nice way to set the tone with what's a little bit longer time cap relative to some of the other ones.
Right.
Um, let's move on to Pro 2. So you got the sandbag cleans, the GHD sit-ups, and the handstand walk. And you mentioned this a little bit before about the nature of some of these sprints. In testing, what was really the goal here? Because I think we all have shades of like sandbag clean finishers and sandbag events where like people are just wrecked by the end, and it can really kind of cause some carnage from people depending on where your midline is and where you're going to be able to knock out these gymnastics.
Yeah, I think the descending rep scheme is cool with the heavier sandbag. I think the 200 sandbag is going to become more and more prevalent in the space. These guys and the 150, these guys and girls are just super strong now, and their efficiencies with odd objects are getting even better.
Mhm.
So it was just another variable that we wanted to bring into the first event was a strongman element. So obviously, the sandbag is a little bit heavy, but I think with the descending rep scheme, people will be able to keep a high pace in the cycle rate. We're going to make them drop them between just to take away some of the ambiguity in like the finish position in a clean when it goes to a touch and go. So we took that out.
So
And
they must
then
drop and reset in between each
yeah,
one? Ah,
yeah, they'll have to
interesting.
drop it, which, should people can still keep a high cadence, but it was more of a
Mhm.
standards consideration than anything else. And then the GHDs, I don't think they will probably won't feel them until that last set. And it's because of the speed. I don't think it's because of the volume.
Mm,
Because 90 GHDs for these men and women isn't really anything, but to do them in a workout where their diaphragm's going to be compressed for most of it, and when they're doing the GHDs, the cadence will be really high, will be challenging. So, and obviously, the handstand walk just was more of a glorified transition, if nothing else. We had it originally with a pirouette in the middle and things like that, but they'll be handstand walking on the turf portion of our field and spray painting lines and things of that nature. It just didn't make sense to clutter up the floor from a visual standpoint. So we just said, you know what, let's just let them bite off bigger chunks of the handstand walk, 50 down, 50 back, and then right to the sandbag. So
yeah,
definitely, letting them express their ability to move an odd object at a heavy load was a factor, but really it's a high output workout. Probably people are going to go faster than everything I say. So 7 to 8 minutes is probably kind of what I'm thinking.
nice. Um, so then we move on to Pro 3. So, um, kind of shifting gears another day. You have a gymnastics upper body pulling complex into a front squat. You said that this one had changed a little bit. What was that change?
Yeah, changed a couple times. So we had the pull-ups as toe to bar,
Oh,
but with the GHDs the day before and things like that, just wanted to give the midline a little bit of a break. And then we had the bar set at 245 for 8 reps across the whole event. Which isn't it didn't change it too much, but I think visually and just what it demands of the athletes is a little bit different and a little more fun to watch, and the rep schemes match now. So that was cool. So we went from 245 across for 8 reps to 245 for 8 reps at the first bar, 265 for 6 on the second bar, and then 285 for 4 on the last bar. And those last two bars will actually be on the far end of the floor. So there will
mm,
be an element of transition where people are going to jog or people are going to walk, and that could be a big differentiator in how they finish. So it's 108 reps on the pull-up bar by the end of it, which is pretty significant. um, and then a lot of front squats at a moderate load to heavy towards the end of it.
yeah.
This might be a dumb question.
No such
force
thing.
do you foresee that everybody goes unbroken from the pull-ups to the chest to bars to the bar muscle up, or since you
And that's a
or
12-minute cap, actually. The images are
okay.
inputted wrong.
Yep.
But competition corner has it all. So yeah, I think so. I did it unbroken when I tested it because I just wanted to get a little bit more rest before the squat. Now I think some athletes will break it because they'll be able to hammer through the squats.
Mm.
I think Hatfield and Mertens come to mind for this event when I think about who could be the favorites. Um,
Just
great levers.
Yeah.
because they're gonna rip everything pretty much, and
I think so.
yeah, yeah. That's gonna be fun. But kind of touching on this one specifically, and obviously for some of the other programmed events too. Call me a historian or whatever you will. I see shades of other programming elements, and I think it's fair to say that, over your career as an athlete or anyone that programs workouts, they'd like to pull elements of things they've experienced, they've seen, build upon that. Is any of that present so far? Because I see a pull-up complex, I think of 21-15-9 from the games, Rich's last year in 2014. Um, that was your, first year at the games. Um, wait, that was that year, right?
Yeah, that was my
Yep.
first year. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
that
Is that something
very
that you're,
well.
like, in the back of my mind, like, "Hey, I'm gonna pull from this?"
Not necessarily specific events. I mean, some of them certainly have impacted the way I think about the sport, but I think that is just natural in anything that we do in life, right? I've competed in a million events and I've done a million of these different workouts and I've programmed for a living for a long time. So, all of that experience definitely impacts this final product and all the
Mhm.
events that we'll be doing with WFP because you are kind of a product of your experiences in a sense. And I've done a lot of incredible events programmed by the games or Rogue or Wadapalooza or whoever, and I've done some bad ones. And you learn from the experiences, you learn from the conversations you have with your coaches and your training partners, and listening to the media, and you try to put forth a product that everybody's happy with at the end of the day. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that for this first, in-person event. So we'll see how
Mhm.
Yeah.
it plays out.
No doubt. I think at some point you should just put out all of your times in one graphic, almost
Oh, yeah.
like a beat the
Beat me if you
director
can.
kind of.
Uh,
Yeah, I would love to see that.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard, right? Because the transitions are different. I'll for sure do that.
Do it
Yeah,
anyways.
I have the whole
yeah.
season right here on my phone programmed, but
Oh man,
the
Woo.
uh yeah, I'd be happy to do that. But with the transitions and the fatigue factors and things like that, just like the athlete in me is like, don't do that. But
Do
um
it. Do it for the
right,
content.
right.
yep.
These guys and girls have put me to shame. So
Well, here's where I'm curious now. Okay,
I like
did you
this.
really test the 1 rep max jerk, or was it like how many moderate reps can I get in this
Yeah.
8 minutes?
yeah, so when I first did this one, we had it at 6 minutes, and
Oof.
because they're gonna have to drop if the bar's over 225 or if 155 for the girls, they'll have to drop it, unload it, then they can clean it up if it's at those weights, 225 or 155, and put it back in the rack. So I just wanted to give them a little bit more time because they'll have to drop the bar just for safety considerations. You've seen the horror stories of the re-racking and it like knocking people over and landing on them. So
Yep.
those weights shouldn't be a problem from re-racking or power cleaning to put in the rack standpoint. So yeah, I went up to probably 90%. Not for no other reason than I just haven't been lifting like crazy. Uh, I hit 380, 382.
That was my
Um,
question. I was like, well, what's
Yeah, I gotta
90%?
know.
Yeah,
Because
I don't know if that's right. I mean, my max is 410, so we'll see. But that was back in the day when I was,
yeah.
really strong and stuff. I'm usually
What did
good to have
Saxon
it.
hit?
Sax didn't do this one. He did the sled one. I can tell
Okay.
you what he did on the sled one, but he didn't do the lift. I don't know what Saxon would hit on this. Probably
Man,
around
382.
355.
I mean, that's still
Hats
legit. I
off.
think a lot of
Yeah.
people are gonna hear that and be like, "Oh, well, that's 90%. Okay,
Maybe well, I
I
don't
might
know.
sit this one out."
95 probably. I'd have to do the math. It's probably over 90%, but just a rough. I wanted to get I wanted to feel what it did to my nervous system going into the bike. Which, if
Yeah.
if nothing else, I think it kind of like excites the nervous system to go at something that's going to be, all out. You almost
Yeah.
want to try and outrace that Echo Bike sled as much as you can because it'll catch up quick.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, yeah. Because I think everyone is as much as this has excitement written all over it, right? Like you think about the things that people love. They love seeing the max rep weights go up.
Mhm.
And then they love seeing that sprint on stuff like echo bike, sled push, legs, whatever, where people are like roasted as they come across the finish line. And I mean, I immediately think of some of the guys like Hopper and Dallin, ripping the echo bike and pushing the sled, and the last step isn't just you push the sled across and you walk across. It's the sled goes, your feet stay planted, and you fall onto your stomach as you cross the finish line.
Yeah, and I think you'll have like 25-ish feet to the finish line once you
Oh,
finish the sled.
oh,
So like there's gonna be some
nasty.
wobbly legs going. I've gotten a lot of most of the athletes have hit me up just talking about the workouts and they're excited and things like that. But this one especially, people like the jerk, it hasn't been tested in a very long time. It's a lower demand on the nervous system than, you know, a max clean or a back squat or something like that would be, especially coming off the weekend of the online semis where people be, you know, have competed. So yeah, people like that. And then the Echo Bike one, like I said earlier, we wanted to utilize the turf. You know, the middle of the floor is all turf. There's about 70 feet of turf, you know, 50 feet of where the work will happen, and then, you know, 10 feet on each end just for transitions. So yeah, I think a lot of the guys have been the whole like king of the Echo Bike thing has been rolling around, and I think we'll see who the queen of the Echo Bike is as well on the ladies' side. So I think, you know, 400 pounds for the guys is kind of that golden ticket. 300 pounds for the girls, and then you know, we'll see what people can do on the Echo Bike. But I think everybody's going to come out really hot, and then just kind of
Who can hang on?
who can hang on. So
Yeah.
that'd be a fun one to end Saturday night, you know,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
lights
And
and everything.
it's a great comparison piece. It's been, 15 years since a one rep max, jerk or then shoulder to overhead was tested for some of these elite athletes. And yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah,
Especially on
yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
I like
um
that
uh,
we're gonna watch them cross the finish line like Bambi too. That makes it even more fun.
Yeah. Yeah, Saxon
uh,
did this one and like was running. I said he wasn't gonna run to the finish line, and we were up there, and I just backed up like 20 feet. And I'm like, dude, just run through me, like as he was on his last sled push, and just took a
oh.
step, rolled, and then just like reached his hand across the finish line.
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
technically that doesn't count, but we'll count it today.
I love it. I love it. And so I mentioned the inspiration piece earlier, but this is also another inspiration piece because 2014 was the first legless uh, regional workout, and that was
That's right.
also one of your qualifying tests, you will, your rookie year. So I was curious if maybe that came into it, or maybe just 10 feels like a nice round number for something like this.
Yeah, I think it does. And that one kind of influenced it. I think this is just kind of the evolution of what it could be. It's a slower paced workout than that one. I think that I'd have to look at the time. So I think it was around 3 to 4 minutes with just the running. This one's a little bit slower, right? It's double the rope climbs, and then you're not sprinting with a yoke. So yeah, and I think on a Sunday morning, you know, it felt like it was the right event to put in there. Nothing too crazy. Usually something that's, and I don't want to give away everything that I'm doing in the season, but yeah, it's a good way to kick off the last day of competition and something that people can get up for and go. Introducing the yoke into you know, the first tour event was something that I wanted to do. We had a C2 bike in there initially, and it just wasn't as fun, wasn't as good of a workout. So scratched the C2 bike, added a yoke, and took it from there. But I think the good rope climbers will get rewarded, especially on those last 3 rounds, I would say. And the yoke should be pretty manageable for everyone. So yeah, good way to kick off Sunday.
And then we close it out. Sorry, I had to make sure my son is
Yeah,
looked after. He wanted to be a part of the interview, so
you're good. He looks good. Look at him.
yeah.
He's excited for these workouts.
He'll be was it WFP Pro class of was this 2044?
Oh my god.
He'll be
There you
crushing
go.
it.
um, so yeah, so this is the finale. Um, a little bit of a chipper, kind of like a quick progress down the line. Uh, Classic lunging to the finish line.
Always love that.
I mean, it almost feels like you kind of have to have it, but I think everyone is going to look at that and be like, 70-pound dumbbells? What the hell?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, for the guys and girls in the pro division, that's nothing new to them.
Yeah.
20 reps isn't too significant. I know with the row and the burpees, there's a little bit of a compounding fatigue element there. But 20 thrusters at 70 pounds and 50 pounds isn't too much. And I think it's really about the strategy and do they break it once? Do they break it twice? Do they go straight from the last thruster walk forward into the lunge? There's a lot of strategy there that I think in the next couple of weeks, athletes will have their game plans dialed in. They've had a lot of time with these workouts.
Mhm.
I think the last 15 feet of that lunge get a little hairy from my experience. So there is some risk there. We're making them do the 25-foot segments unbroken. So,
Oh, wow.
it's not if you drop it 5 feet away, take a step back and redo it. It's 25 feet, which is pretty
Go back.
significant.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a big
So
decision.
yeah, it's a big decision, and I think athletes with really just good positions will be rewarded. Typically athletes that have better movement mechanics under fatigue can just hold on to that load or pace a little bit longer. So I think, you'll see the athletes with really strong overhead lunge positions, especially with dumbbells, which demand a little bit more refined technique, could excel here. But a
Yeah.
lunge to the finish is always exciting. So
You get a
Yeah.
couple wobbly arms in there, and can they hold on or
yeah,
not?
yeah, yeah, and they'll be lunging on turf, which is another element that is,
Oh,
to
interesting.
to consider, right? It's a surface that's a little bit less stable than the rubber
Mhm.
floor. So yeah, there's something there to think about if athletes are training the next couple of weeks. Maybe go out to your local high school and do some lunges on turf, so you're at least acquainted with what that feels like.
And I mean, you've been very forthcoming with the programming, the details, and everything like that. And you mentioned that like they'll have their kind of strategies dialed. Where do you think like the gray area exists between like your strategy and accounting for how things, let's say, ramp up on game day at game day speeds, right? Because you talk to any athlete around, the sport, and they're like, "Yeah, this was my plan. This is how I had worked it out in practice." But it's really tough to account for like that. Let's call it 5 to 8% that you get from adrenaline and from being on the floor with your boys, and the
Right.
atmosphere that changes it, and can have ramifications later on in the weekend too.
Yeah, I think that comes with being a refined pro and trusting your process and trusting your preparation and knowing that that will serve you best on game day. I
Mhm.
think there is definitely, that 5%, like you said, that can elevate your performance. But I think it's understanding when and where to let it elevate your performance, right? I think the first event coming out way too hot on the first run, which is probably going to happen, but it happens every time, but isn't necessarily the smartest move for an event that is that long of a time domain,
Yeah.
could actually hurt your performance. Where maybe on something like the Echo bike, it could elevate you if elevate you just that little bit to get you across the finish line before it all comes crashing down. So these these people are refined pros. They have a ton of experience. It's probably one of the most experienced fields ever. So, they'll know when to go and when not to go, when to take a risk and when not to. So that's up to them. And, there's a lot of opportunity to make those decisions on this weekend, which I think will be fun to watch for everyone. So that'll be pretty cool.
When you
Yeah.
look at the timeline of even putting out these workouts, this is, a little more than 3 weeks before they even get to the competition floor. Why make that decision? Do you want the athletes to test all of these and have a really refined game plan going in? Or what led to, releasing them early enough where they really could test all of these?
Yeah, there's a couple factors. I think first and foremost that the athletes having an idea what they're doing and understanding the flows and the standards is important. Just from being an athlete, that makes sense to understand, to have the answers to the test before you go to the test, so you can study it and actually refine what you do on game day. Another element is just the coaches and making their jobs a little bit easier. And, they're having to peak and taper these athletes a million times this year for the athletes that are doing the online stuff, for our stuff, uh, the in person semifinals and our events and the online qualifiers. So letting them have a little bit more insight into what we're doing is going to help how they prepare their athletes. And a big part of these coaches' jobs is ensuring that their athletes are healthy, mentally and physically, and that they're prepared. And I think the more time that they have with the workouts that we're providing them, the better that they can do their jobs.
Mhm.
So that is part of it. And then the final reason would be because of the other events and the proximity to all the events this year. If we can be a uh, if we can have our stuff out there so people understand at least part of what they're competing in this year, it's better. It gives them a little bit of peace of mind. So, yeah, and I think in other sports, if I'm going to go run a marathon in Nashville, I'm going to know what the course is and stuff like that way ahead of time, so I know what I'm preparing for. So there's a lot of factors that I think led into us doing it this early, and we'll do it again for Mesa and then again for the finals.
Mhm.
Yeah. If maybe this is less quantifiable, but if you had to pick like your programming style, I know everyone wants to say like, "Hey, well-rounded test. We uncover a lot of stuff." But certain people, they favor the barbell, or they like a little heavier, higher power output, or someone loves triplets and the classic like weightlifting monostructural gymnastics triplet. Is there something about you that you feel like captures your style as a programmer, the Will Moorad, if you will?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I've had the privilege to work with a lot of the best coaches in the space and train with a lot of the best athletes in the space and be around for a really long time. So I think all of those experiences, learning from the coaches and their philosophies that I've worked with, learning from the athletes that I train with and their approach to different events, and just their general opinion about what specific workout, why they like specific workouts, all played a factor. It's funny, everybody like handstand push-ups, Will's gonna win that workout, whatever. Everybody's like, dude, there's no handstand push-ups, and I'm like, well, I figured everybody train them. Maybe I can at least trick you for now. But the
Yeah,
handstand push-ups
yeah.
are coming, guys. I
Oh,
promise.
all right, all right.
They're coming. And they had them in the qualifier.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think my style has been shaped and is continuing to be shaped just by the people I've been exposed to, and I've been privileged to be around some of the best in the space for a really long time. So, credit goes to all those people that have helped kind of inform these decisions. And then obviously the WFP team who reins me in when I need to be reined in if I show them a workout that's a little bit too crazy or whatever. So there's some accountability internally as well.
What are
So yeah.
some of the craziest things that you've brought to the table and they're like, "Nah, Will, we can't do that yet."
Yeah,
Can
that's what
you
I
can
want to
you
know.
reveal?
Right. Well, we have a movement list that we put out, right? And all
Uh-huh.
I
What
am
didn't make the cut?
constrained. Yeah, I am constrained to what we put out at the beginning of the season. Um, some events for I don't know, a couple of the qualifiers for the next qualifier, I got talked down a little bit. They might have been a little bit too advanced from a load standpoint. So I didn't change the events too much. I just made the weight a little bit lighter. But Jason Saxon, everybody who's doing the qualifier for Mesa, you can thank them for making the weights a little bit lighter, which I'm sure we'll talk about down the road. That's in July.
Yeah.
So first things first, Indy.
Yep. First things first, Indy. And my son is about at it, so I'm gonna have
Cool,
to
man.
sign off here.
Do your thing. Do your thing.
Yep, yep. But we really appreciate the time. Well, love chatting. It's an open door. I'm excited to be able to be part of the broadcast team in Indianapolis and see these play out in person. And I know a lot of people are excited for this, and we always appreciate the openness to talk programming.
Yeah, of course. No, thanks for having me on.
Great to catch up, Will.